Shame is not merely an emotion. It can be so deeply and developmentally rooted, it becomes the basis from which you operate. Shame is sneaky, and it lies. It hides in perfectionism, people-pleasing, overfunctioning, and that tiny voice that tells you you are never enough. If you're tired of shame running the show, join me for a deep dive workshop where we learn what shame actually is, how it operates in the mind and body, and most importantly, how to loosen its grip and call it out for the liar that it is. This workshop is practical, empowering, and trauma-informed. Real tools to reclaim your worth and rewrite your self-talk. If you're ready to step into a healthier story, sign up at theedifygroup.com. This is Hungry for Healing. Real people, real pain, real peace. I'm Becky, by the way, Wengreen, a marriage and family therapist, sharing stories that nourish, edify, and heal, reminding us that even in heavy darkness, we can expect light to come. So welcome. Here we are today. Thanks for coming to Hungry for Healing. Today we're here with Kyle Reid.
Thank you.
Who is my friend. He is my friend. He's been my supervisor and my mentor since 2019, a while ago.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah. And I invited him because I love and respect him and I like his work. He is an LMFT, which means he's a licensed marriage and family therapist, but he's also an expert on maladaptive sexual behavior. Is that how you would say that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And he is co-owner of Connections Counseling Services, which have offices in Orem and Murray and maybe others opening soon. And then newly founding Dimensions. Is that what it's called?
Dimensions Institute, yeah.
Dimensions Institute, which is about maladaptive sexual behaviors.
Unwanted.
Right? Unwanted or
problematic, probably more of those terms. But
yeah. And that's what you're going to talk to us today about, right?
Yeah.
Is about 12 dimensions.
12 dimensions of healthy sexuality.
Of healthy sexuality, which is a specialty that you have. And you treat couples and individuals and have done for how long now?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I gotta go back to time.
A while. Years.
Yes. 14 years or something.
So you've got a lot of background, a lot of experience.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. So tell me about 12 dimensions. That's a lot of dimensions.
Yeah, I know. It feels like a lot sometimes, but so.
Oh, and you're writing a book.
Yes, I am writing a book on the 12 dimensions.
Which I will definitely buy.
Yeah, good. Hopefully it will be well written. But I specifically specialize in treating individuals and families with problematic sexual behavior. But I also see a lot of individual and couples just on a general level. But the last couple of years, most of the work that I have done has been on expanding and educating and lecturing on the 12 dimensions of healthy sexuality. So originally they did not come from me. They came from Dr. Carnes, or at least he drew them out as a result of the studies, or as a result of the interviews that he did with over 1,000 addicts and their partners. And so, but the truth is that they've existed before that.
He just kind of
he just brought them together.
And
he wrote a book called Sexual Anorexia and about them, but Carnes' task work and integrating some of the 12 steps, things like that, because there's so much workbooks and materials, and so I wanted to transfer a lot of that online and then make it simplistic. But as I did that, I realized that out of all of that work, there was no solid anchor of healthy sexuality.
Mhm.
There's talk about healthy sexuality, right? But healthy sexuality is kind of one of those terms that people talk about, but they don't know exactly how to define it.
Yes.
And in some ways it becomes this, it's whatever you want it to be, right? And then you get kind of one side that it's whatever we want it to be, and you get another side that it needs to be controlled and maintained and monitored, right?
Yeah.
Because it can destroy lives.
Yeah.
And so, and then, and those two groups tend to not get along.
Right.
So, um, and so you get a lot of debate around what healthy sexuality is, but even problematic sexual behavior in general, you get a lot of debate on whether or not there's a problem with that. And so when I was doing this work, I found that, there's a lot of material out there, a lot of tools, a lot of resources that are extremely helpful and valuable.
Mm.
They're not anchored in anything positive and a vision of what healthy looks like, right?
And man, is that so needed. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even thinking of an anchor in healthy sexuality, part of that, it's like, yeah, where is that? Because it's hard to talk about. It's hard to teach your kids. It's hard to be something you don't know and then teach your kids,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. How do you teach your kids about healthy sexuality?
About something you don't even know, right?
Yeah.
Because your parents didn't
Well,
say anything to you.
Well, and a lot of parents, they just kind of tend to stay away from it because
Yeah.
it's like, well, I don't want to say anything that's going to open up a whole can of worms. And so, and what do I say that's healthy and that's age appropriate? And so it's kind of easier. Sex in general, it's vulnerable. It's a
Totally.
sensitive subject. It tends to have a lot of emotion to it. And so you get a lot of high energy when it comes to people talking about
Yeah.
sexuality in
Yes.
general and
Mhm.
sexual identity
A
and
lot
so
of
forth.
shame.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you get a lot of that. So it's a difficult subject, but part of my goal is to educate, especially when it comes to the treatment of problematic sexual behavior, to where sex has become something that I want and I have a passion for, but then I'm terrified of.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's ruined my life, hypothetically, right? So
Yeah.
with someone who experiences that, a part of them really values that to achieve connection and intimacy, but the other part is terrified of it because it has created problems. There needs to be a shift in the way that you see yourself, your sexual self, and especially a foundation of recovery that is based on healthy sexuality. And a lot of these types of clients, they might have a lot of experience with sex when it comes to sexual behaviors or whatnot. When it comes to healthy sexuality, they don't.
Yes. Being healthy and being experienced are very different, very different
things. And a lot
things.
of it tends to be focused on orgasm and like genital intimacy, when healthy sexuality is so much more than that. And so, which is what a lot of the 12 dimensions are based on, is everything that is in the realm of what healthy sexuality is.
Very
And
cool.
as you pursue recovery from problematic sexual behavior on a foundation that's anchored in healthy sexuality, then you will find more of a fulfilling and meaningful life.
Because it's part of life.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell a lot of my clients, look, there's not a lot of people walking the planet that haven't gotten here because somebody had sex.
Yeah. Well, and part of the problem though is that you get the community when the sex addiction was developed and it kind of adapted to the 12 steps adapted to it. But the problem is the 12 steps were originally created for AA, right?
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
and you can't, and you can technically live without alcohol, but you can't necessarily live a meaningful and happy life without sex. And so and so they just kind of took the 12 steps, they adapted it to problematic sexual behavior or sex addiction. And it works in some ways, but it doesn't in a lot of ways. And so the focus tends to be a lot on problem management, because that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
what a lot of the themes of the 12 steps
Mm-hmm.
sometimes sway, when in
Mm-hmm.
reality, the 12 steps have a lot of principles to it, but
Mm-hmm.
people kind of sometimes don't see those, and
Yeah.
they just focus on managing the problem and using the steps to fix the problem, or quote problem. And so everything becomes about managing their sexuality, when that creates an internal conflict, especially parts of you that want to connect with those
Yeah.
parts.
And it sounds like you're talking about a process of becoming sexually healthy rather than just managing
Yeah.
the sexual help. That's
Yeah.
the difference
Mhm.
that I'm hearing, is that you want to become sexually healthy rather than just, white knuckling or managing, suppressing, or I don't know, controlling.
Yes. Yeah. So, and in the past, there's been a lot of focus on what I'm recovering from, right? And but then, as Jay Stringer in his book talks about, it's like, well, what is that freedom for, right? Like, and who are you becoming?
Mm.
Like, am I forever going to be known as a recovering sex addict,
Yeah.
right? And does that identity ever change? And that's something that I will talk about in the book in more detail. But in what the 12 dimensions help to
Yeah.
do is this journey of becoming, of who you are trying to become based on these dimensions. And it doesn't matter what approach you use, steps or Carnes tasks, or um cognitive behavioral, or you know
Mm-hmm.
um, ACT. I mean, it doesn't matter the approach that you use, because everything can be filtered through the dimensions, because these are principles.
Great.
They're not practices. They're second order change principles of
Gotcha.
becoming.
Love it. Okay. So, and you're presenting like you've been around the country even presenting this.
Uh-huh.
So I'm excited. Tell
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Well, where do you want to start?
Well, do they have an order?
Yes. So they do. And we've got 12 dimensions. The first 6 dimensions are about the individual journey.
Okay.
And there's a shift that happens where the focus of recovery and that journey of becoming a healthy sexual person is away from trying to figure out myself, and into how can I connect with people, or at least how do people relate with me, and what does my relationships with others look like,
Mm-hmm.
and how can I make a difference in other people's
Mm-hmm.
lives, and finding purpose and
And
meaning.
and how am I perceived by
Yeah.
others?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that.
And so that first dimension is nurturing. And so we start off by asking yourself, like, what does nurturing look like? And when part of the work that I've done with dimensions is I've created what I call guiding principles.
Mm-hmm.
And so each dimension serves as a paradigm shift. And so these paradigm shifts occur in the process of healthy sexuality, and reframing the way that you see yourself and your sexuality and this person you're trying to become.
And so when you talk about nurturing, it sounds like you're nurturing your own your own self and your own sexuality.
Yeah, and that's the thing about sex is, the window to the soul. So whatever issues that you're having on a sexual level are most likely having on a personal and a genital level, and vice versa.
Wow.
And so,
I always thought that your eyes were the window to the soul.
well, I mean, I guess that's one phrase, right?
But that is so, as a therapist, I really think that is so true, because there's so much that we can see when we get insight into that realm of our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
The tentacles.
Yeah. Especially if we can do it without judgment or condemnation. And if we just understand, okay, what is this part of me trying to communicate with me? Like, what are some of the needs behind the sexual behaviors that I engage in, or that I might find like arousing or intriguing?
Mm-hmm.
And um, learning more about yourself and
Mm-hmm.
the struggles that you have, and really connecting with that part.
Mm-hmm.
So these paradigm shifts are kind of the natural process of recovery and in that journey of becoming a healthy
Mm-hmm.
sexual person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I created these guiding principles. So each dimension has 3 guiding principles that are the building blocks of each dimension.
Okay.
And so, and I've created affirmations for them. So it is a way of saying, okay, where do I fit in this journey of nurturing, right? And one of them is nurturing. I accept my current reality, and that can I accept that who I am, what I'm struggling with, and whatever these issues are in my life, can I be honest with myself about what the reality of my situation is, and that I can't do this by myself and I need
Mm-hmm.
other people. And so
Mm-hmm.
each dimension will complement each 12 step. And so it's kind of a combination of taking the 12-step principles, so the principles behind each step, and also the principles of healthy sexuality. And so they become more sexual health paradigms. So when an individual that experiences problematic sexual behavior from others and then nurturing others, right?
Okay.
And so a lot of individuals don't realize that their need to nurture others is just as important as the need to receive nurturing from others, and also nurturing oneself. And there
Mm-hmm.
has to be a balance on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they kind of feel like they've worked through that balance, or they really feel like they've reached that place where they really understand that they have needs, they take responsibility for those needs, and they accept the fact that they need other people to meet those needs too, then they kind of naturally transition into the second dimension, which is the sensual awareness dimension. Patrick Carnes refers to it as sensuality. I personally think sensual awareness is better, just because it kind of encompasses not just the sensual part of things, but just the mindfulness is essential.
How would you define sensual? What do you
So
define that
like,
word as?
connecting with your senses, touch,
Okay.
hearing, feeling, seeing, like, and the world around you. And it's kind of stepping away from the problem and then having more of an overview effect, right?
Mm,
Like, and am I part of something bigger, right?
yeah.
And maybe I don't have to do this alone. Maybe I'm not alone. Maybe there's other people that are struggling with this too. So it's just you step into that awareness, not only of everything around you, but with what you're feeling, like what that means, without judgment, without condemnation or violence towards yourself. And then it goes into that self-image
Okay.
dimension. Now, each dimension tends to kind of naturally flow, but
Okay.
that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to um, work through the dimensions in this manner, right?
Yeah.
So self-image and nurturing is kind of a good example of that. So there's basic nurturing where like you accept that you have needs and that you're responsible for them. But sometimes that gets clouded by the self-image stuff where
Mhm.
it's really like there has to be a belief that I am worthy of love, that I actually deserve to have my needs met, and that I'm
Mhm.
worthy of that. And so and that this area to where when you have this sense of worth, of love and belonging, you learn to trust people. You accept other people into your life. You accept nurturing and love and affection, because there's a difference between I'm wanting love in my life or wanting to receive love in my life and actually receiving love that
Yes.
people give you,
Mhm.
and tend to find reasons to believe that we're not love, or no matter what that or how much somebody tries to give you that love, like if it
Right.
doesn't fit to your expectations, then it means I'm not loved, right? So that self-image dimension is really about exploring that
Mhm.
worthiness of love and belonging,
Mhm.
um, and that I have something to offer others, that I can honor my path that I'm on. It's kind of letting go of comparison. So sometimes you get people that needs to do some work in that dimension first before they really start to accept that nurturing.
I can see that because, man, does that take a lot of honesty,
Yeah.
raw honesty. Because there's so many protective measures we can put out there to to mask that, right? If we don't have a good self-image, we can mask that by other things and not really even think that we do, but we do. Is that making sense? That we really have to come out of this place and get super honest with, maybe I really don't feel good about myself. Or for some, of course, that's really easy. They feel terrible and they know it. But for some, we aren't as aware of what our self-image is and how that distorts and how it pushes love away from us because we feel unlovable. So we're not going to receive. But then we blame everybody else.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And so, and it complements that step 3. I mean, step 3 is, I turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understand him, something like that. I'm trying to remember the exact step 3, but just, but in reality, it's not just about God or a higher power. It's also about other people, and feeling like I do feel like I have something to offer other people and they have something to offer me. And I can maybe I can trust people. Maybe I can trust that people will love me and that I am worthy of that love. Right. And so through recovery, in that recovery journey, you get into those areas. And the thing is that when you're dealing with problematic sexual behavior, a lot of those themes come out in their sexual behavior. So the very behaviors that they're struggling with have these themes. They show up like where you're looking for that love and that nurturing.
Give me an example of how that could show up for somebody.
Well, a common one I talk about is in nurturing is our arousal templates.
Okay.
Or the specific ways that what we're specifically attracted to, right? If you have somebody that attends massage parlors, for example, and say that's their kind of go-to with some of the problematic behavior that they engage in, right? And so sometimes what they might not understand is, well, why specifically massage parlors, right? So what does that do specifically for you versus going and picking up somebody at a bar or looking at pornography instead? But it just depends on the person. But when you get somebody that attends massage parlors, sometimes the root of that is this desire to be nurtured. Like, if somebody cares for me and touches me and like is just focusing on me, and there's this part of me that may be looking for nurturing, and maybe maybe there's a part of me that's saying, hey, I really need to take care of myself. Maybe I focus so much on making sure that everybody else is happy that when I'm not taking care of myself, I go to these places. I go to these problematic sexual behaviors that are really just trying to say, hey, you need to be nurtured, and you're trying to meet this need of nurturing, right? And again, it's backfiring on me because I'm not going to be able to meet that need through going to a massage parlor. But once I understand that need, then I can understand, oh, this is what this part of me is looking for, and how do I nurture myself in my life?
Yeah. And just that awareness can help us shift a little bit.
Yeah. Nurturing, essential awareness, self-image, and then it kind of goes into the kind of a second phase, starting with the self-definition, which is when you reach this place of feeling like I have worth, of love and belonging. Now it's about, I need to kind of really examine who I am, and then what I've done, as well as like my weaknesses and my strengths, and not be afraid to take a look at the shadow parts of me. Right? So as you can see, it kind of complements that 4th step, which is taking a moral inventory. So you're really just your willingness to look at who you are, all of your shadow parts, all those things you don't like about yourself. And then you're not only seeing the things that you recognize that you want to change in your life, but also the things that you saw as weaknesses are really strengths. And so it's kind of that journey of being more authentic with who you are, and
a real identity. Kind of building.
And seeing your talents and your gifts and where you struggle, your limitation, and the personal boundaries you might need to have in your life. But it's kind of entering to that realm of what I really believe and how I really feel and what I really value. And so that's that.
Mhm.
dimension is about. And then we go into what I call the openness dimension. And so Dr. Karn specifically refers to it as sexual comfort, which is really the element of like being comfortable with your sexuality and kind of reducing the shame around that. But to me, that's kind of only really one aspect of openness. And so as you can see, it kind of complements that step 5, right? Where you share your moral inventory. So you become more authentic with other people and be vulnerable with them and let them see you. But it's
Mhm.
also this recognition at this phase where you realize that I need daily consultation. I can't just be open with somebody one time and tell them about my story, and then I can go back to just not being open at all.
Yeah.
Like I have to have an ongoing, open, vulnerable
Mhm.
relationship with other people in order for me to be happy. And that's a principle of life. All of these are principles of life. And the beauty thing about these dimensions is you don't get to say what the principle is because principles are natural laws. But you can get to decide how you want to live by that principle. What
Mm.
openness looks like
Mhm.
personally for you. What does vulnerability look like personally for you?
So you
Or
give that principle and then you find a way that that's authentic to your identity.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, which is so scary for some of us
no,
that have been hiding or that have had behaviors that obviously, because this is addressing maladaptive or
yep.
problematic behavior, that kind of honesty can be so scary.
Yeah, it is because there's fear of judgment there, right? And all that,
Mhm.
a lot of that is worked in that dimension. You get some of that's worked in the other dimensions too, like the self-image dimension, because there's just that idea of really
Mhm.
being okay with people seeing the
Mhm.
truth about
Mhm.
everything, and then taking ownership of your life and what you've done. And part of that, even the self-definition dimension, one of the guiding principles for that is the taking responsibility for your life. And that's a hard one because we tend to feel like, well, I'm only who I am because of what happened to me. When, well, all of this stuff happened to you, yes, and you don't own what other people did, but you still have to take responsibility for how you felt about it and the choices
Mhm.
that you made in your life. And that it's hard for people to kind of step out of that victim perspective,
Yes.
actually take true ownership of their life and everything that's happened in their life in a way.
Mhm.
And then that reclaiming that agency is powerful. And so, but as we journey through their openness dimension, and then we take a journey to our 6th dimension, this is one of my favorite dimensions, and I call that sexual renewal. So in Dr. Karn's book, he refers to it as knowledge, sexual knowledge, which I also think can be very limited because, well, that's one aspect of the sexual renewal dimension,
Mhm.
which is really about like once you understand, like you're not afraid to understand sex, to understand what it is, educating yourself on that,
Mhm.
as well as
Mhm.
being open-minded about okay, what's good fantasy, what's bad fantasy, what's good sex,
Mhm.
what's bad sex, and then for me, what's healthy, what's not healthy, and then being not afraid, take ownership of your sexuality, and all of that, those parts of you are super important. So the sexual renewal phase follows the step 6, which is becoming entirely ready to have God remove my character weaknesses, right? And I was thinking about this dimension because part of my goals was to integrate it more with the steps and the step
Mhm.
principles. And I think Dr. Carnes did a really good job at kind of starting that process, but it wasn't quite finished, like if that makes sense. So I thought about this step. I'm like, okay, where is a point where you get to be ready to actually um let God remove your character weaknesses or being okay with letting them go, right? And to
Mhm.
me, that's when that happens, there's a shift between where you stop living your life where you're defined by what you've done wrong and you start living your life by who you want to be. Kind of what
Mhm.
this whole process is about, right?
Mhm.
And that to me is really what that sexual renewal phase is, where sex stops becoming something I should be afraid of or something that's bad. And actually and where I step into the kind of life, not only on a sexual level, but on a general level, where
Mhm.
I take ownership of that sexuality is something that's good and I can celebrate and I can see as something that is powerful
Mm.
for me in my relationships, but it's also the way I can choose to live my life, that I can live my life by reclaiming my excellence, not by escaping the bad or being afraid of
Mhm.
of of
The ins and outs of the sexual experience and
yeah.
what our bodies are built to do.
Yeah, and not be like be afraid to look at that
Yeah.
without judgment, right?
Yeah, because they're just built that way. I mean, we're made for these certain responses, and we're trained to be ashamed of those at a very young age. And then trying to develop through that in a healthy way can be really challenging, but it's just such a natural thing. If we had more knowledge and if we can put it in that place, but this renewal, that sounds so hopeful.
Yeah, it is meant to be. And when I talked about some of these oppositions, right? You get one part of the community that tends to be sexual freedom, right? Sex is what we want it to be. And then you get one that's like, well, hold on a second. Like there's danger there. There needs to be more
Mhm.
control and management. But then you get these two communities that kind of butt heads and they don't and there's no finding common ground. And to me, that's really what it is you sex can be something that is good, and that we can see as a good thing, but that doesn't mean that it can't be problematic, right?
Well,
And
yeah,
and that it can't cause pain and suffering,
right.
especially when we forget about other people and we realize that sex is about our connection with somebody else, not about ourselves.
Right.
And so when sex becomes too self-focused and self-consuming and without regard to
Eh,
other people,
It
and
becomes harmful,
it does.
just like anything can be turned as a weapon, which is horrible, but it can be a very, very good thing used with the intention that it was created for.
Yeah. And so a lot of these individuals know that, right? But then they're also afraid of that. They're afraid of those parts of themselves. And part of that journey is reclaiming that excellence or the goodness and the meaning about sex. But it changes in the way that it doesn't mean that I can just do whatever I want and it's not going to cause consequences, right? Because before we're working on the dimensions of taking responsibility for our actions, the harm
Mm,
that it caused, recognizing true meaning, being essentially aware of not only myself but other people there, right?
yeah, my choices affect others,
Yeah.
and they can attract others to me or repel others from me.
Yeah. So you get these first six dimensions
Okay?
that are kind of that personal journey where an individual works through a lot of their stuff to get ready to starting working on healthy relationships. And so
Mhm.
then you get the seventh dimension, which is relationships dimension. And so it's like they get to a place where they can say, okay, what are good relationships and what are unhealthy relationships? And maybe I need to change my definition of what a good
Mhm.
relationship
Mhm.
is and my definition of what an unhealthy relationship is and my expectations
Yeah.
of relationships. And so they start to think about their relationships with their parents, their relationships with peers, the relationships with both the opposite and same sex and the issues. And so they start to see that a lot of the sexual issues that they've had is a reflection of not just their opposite sex relationships, but their same sex relationships and the lack thereof, right? And so recognizing that I need relationships with good relationships. Not only should
Mhm.
not be afraid, for example, if I'm a man, I shouldn't be afraid of vulnerability, like with other men, right? But I also need to learn how to not sexualize relationships with women and actually treat them respectfully. And you also work on, okay, vertical relationships, horizontal relationships. What does a healthy relationship look like with my parents and my kids? And
Mhm.
so that in that dimension, you're working on developing healthy relationships. Part of that is that step seven, which is like asking God to remove your character weaknesses. And you're like, well, what does that have to do with relationships? to me, it's everything.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
when you're looking at your character weaknesses, you're looking at your relationships, like you're looking at how people feel about you. I mean, it's impossible to evaluate your weaknesses without evaluating your relationships and with other people.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of that.
Yeah. And when you mention vertical and horizontal, let's just make clear a vertical relationship is meaning a parent child, or it has, would you call it a hierarchy? How would you describe the vertical?
So a vertical relationship is a relationship between parents and children where like where one person or one party, there's an expectation of love or like of um meeting their emotional needs,
Okay.
but then a child can expect to receive that from their parent, but a parent should not expect to get their needs met through their children.
Okay. And that's the vertical.
Yes.
And then the horizontal is more
Is where there's a mutual benefit of need. So it's like
like a sibling or a
yeah,
peer
yeah, it's like, hey,
or,
I give you something, you give me something, and we maintain this healthy relationship because
right.
we both understand that we see each other as equals.
And it's reciprocal
Yeah.
and it comes around and okay. Love it. So that's 7.
Yes. 8, which is the partnership dimension. And so this is a dimension that sometimes people have a hard time with, especially in society, because you're saying, well, how does a partnership principle of life, right? Especially if those who don't believe in monogamous relationships. And again, you can't change the principles, they're just there. It's like trying to change gravity. You might not believe in gravity, but gravity exists. So even when you get into these ideas that we can live in non-monogamous relationships, that's often problematic. I see those clients all the time, and there's a natural desire to connect intimately with somebody, with a partner, and a deep romantic
Yeah,
partner.
that is why breakups hurt so bad. Why would they if that wasn't such a key part of our existence?
Yeah,
They hurt so much more than, a friend gets mad at you. That's hard, that's painful, but a breakup or a divorce or something like that, man, you're talking, nauseating
uh,
pain that is just lingering and long and there's something in us that just wants that special connection, that
yeah.
intimate connection with someone, that partner, that person. You're my person.
Yeah. So the partnership dimension is learning to be vulnerable, intimate, and connected in a committed relationship, right? And so the 3 guiding principles is kind of to me based on, I mean, you kind of see this phase with partnerships where at first there needs to be not only just the acknowledgement of a commitment, like when you get in a marriage, but there needs to be an emotional commitment.
Right.
Like I need to close that hatch. Like I need to stop thinking that oh, if this doesn't work out, I can just leave, or that resistance to really give yourself over to somebody else. And so there needs to be a decision that I've stopped trying to wonder if I'd be happier with somebody else or with another life, and I choose my partner. I really choose my partner for who they are. So there's that first phase. They really have to emotionally choose their partner and accept them. And I have the capacity to make changes in this relationship, and I have to take responsibility for those changes. So you kind of let go of blame. So it's moving on from blame and into a sense of a personal accountability for where the relationship is at and the willingness to do whatever it takes
Yeah.
on your part to fix that.
So good. I mean, closing, like, I love that analogy of closing all the exit doors. There's, you call it an escape hatch, right? They're closed and you are choosing.
Yeah.
You are not just on paper, but you are actually emotionally, psychologically choosing that this is my commitment.
And that's that paradigm shift, right? That needs to occur.
Yeah.
And then you get people that kind of can do those first 2 guiding principles, but then like what usually happens is they're like, okay, well, this is her problem, this is my problem. And it's like, I'm doing my problem, she's not doing her problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that third guiding principle is another shift where it's like, well, there's no more me problems or your problems. There's just our problems. And so it's
This
like
is
we take
us.
full, yes. So we take ownership of our problems together, and we face our problems together, and we don't separate those anymore. And so that creates a unity in the relationship that's essential. And then you get into the next dimension, which is the non-genital intimacy dimension. And so, which is really about learning how to achieve a degree of intimacy, especially sexual intimacy, without the need to use genitals. And that's really important, not only physically, but emotionally and generally, because you see how a lot of those get reflected in normal life. And so when you have somebody that really struggles to achieve a degree of intimacy, that they feel like they need sex in order to achieve any degree of intimacy, that gets reflected on general, like on a general
So
life.
you're not talking about sexual, necessarily physical sex.
This could be
for a minute.
touch. It could be a lot of things.
But it's intimacy that is on an emotional level, not necessarily a physical level.
Could be both.
Okay.
But it's not necessarily intimacy that has to do with having an orgasm.
Okay.
Or that has to do with touching somebody's genitals. So it's this, like, if you think about, I mean, you can see that on a sexual level, but try to expand that on a general level, like in the way that where I have to have an agenda all the time. Like, it's like, unless I accomplish this expectation or agenda, I can't be happy. And so it's this idea that, wait a minute, it's like learning to find joy in the journey rather than the destination. And so you see so people that have issues with non-genital intimacy, they have issues with the other parts of that, which is like, I can't have joy in journeys. There needs to be a destination. I always have to have an agenda or a destination, and I can't be happy without one. So, and so it's kind of that idea of, and that's a really important paradigm shift that needs to happen, that really correlates with problematic sexual behavior, whether you think so or not.
Wow. So how do you suggest people achieve that?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, they can achieve it in a lot of
It's a huge question.
I mean, there's lots of things they can do just by and it depends on the person, because part of the journey here is, and again, I didn't mention this, but which I usually do. So part of the problem with recovery is you go to these professionals, and then they're like, okay, well, let's manage your behavior, right? Let's make sure. And so you get focused on relapse, you get focused on relapse prevention.
How many days can you go?
Yeah. And so, and that becomes the sole focus, right? And then we're like, well, what does healthy looks like, right? What exactly does that look like? So what they do is they fill them with, like, okay, positive, healthy behavior lists, right? Where that could be, well, I need to start exercising, I need to eat right, I need to journal, or maybe I need to reach out, or maybe I need to pray, or maybe I need to go to therapy, which are all good things, right?
Right.
The problem is that that sexual part of you is not necessarily connected to any of that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, what do you mean? You want me to stop looking at porn and exercise instead? No, I'm not going to do that. So that doesn't last.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is you're kind of understanding these parts of you, and then and through these dimensions, and then you create goals because you understand the needs. And so a lot of these same goals get created, which is exercise or reaching out or whatever, but it's through the lens of healthy sexuality now.
Okay.
And so, when I give an example a little bit of the nurturing one, where it's like, okay, now that I understand I'm going to massage parlors, how do I actually nurture myself? What is this part of me actually looking for to be nurtured? Maybe I need to give myself time to nurture myself. And so maybe that looks like exercising. Maybe that looks like writing in my journal. Maybe that's meditating. I don't know. It depends on the person.
But it's self-care of some kind.
Yes. Or it could be, yeah. So it could be a lot. But so to answer your question is with the non-genital intimacy, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, that's what it was.
So some of that might be, let's say, like to making sure that I'm giving myself quality time to connect with my partner or, let's say, my kids without feeling like we need to be doing something or there needs to be some sort of agenda, but that we can
Mhm.
just actually enjoy our time
So
together.
it's just about connecting and being present without necessarily having to check boxes. There's the
Yes.
agenda,
It's
right?
learning to achieve connection, intimacy, being
Mhm.
present without necessarily needing that needs to be filled with an ideal or
Yeah.
an agenda,
Yeah,
like you
you
said.
can just be and enjoy and listen and connect and relate and talk, and it's being present with other people that you love or creating that connection and creating that love by the way you show up.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you get into the general intimacy
Mhm.
dimension, which is our 10th dimension. And so, which usually people say that this is what sex is all about, but remember, this is only just one dimension. But you'd be surprised how often issues occur just with this one dimension. And because there is the finding joy in the journey,
Mm.
but then the 10th dimension or the general intimacy dimension, on a sexual level, it looks like being able to have erotic pleasure with the use of genitals. But in reality, it's more than that. It's about the willingness to let ourselves be really seen as we are, especially by our partner, and to be that vulnerable and to trust somebody that much where we don't hide these parts of ourselves. We take that risk, but it's also about giving yourself permission to enjoy the reward. And I think sometimes that happens a lot.
Mhm. With no guilt, no shame. It's because wow.
Yeah. So some of the
Mhm.
issues that you might see there is, for example, it's a woman that wants the lights off, for example, like when she's
Mhm.
having sex with her
Sure,
partner.
sure.
It's like, I don't really want to be seen, like, because that's where we're the most vulnerable is in that place with
Mhm.
genital intimacy.
Mhm.
But it's really a reflection of, can I let myself be really loved, right? And so you can
Mhm.
kind of see that there's elements of nurturing, there's elements of sensual image or self-image, but it kind of is to a greater degree,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so you can kind of see this growth phase that's happening
Yeah.
where you can get to that point where you can really let down your walls in that place. And so
Yeah.
usually when people have issues with genital intimacy, that they're reflected on some of those personal areas.
And that's a struggle for so many to allow the love and to be confident in that if we've suffered rejection or a number of different things we could have suffered that make that put obstacles there for us to allow and to be comfortable and receive and believe that someone could feel that way about us when we don't feel that way about us,
Yeah, yeah. Totally.
right?
Totally. And so then you get into the spiritual dimension, which is another one that a lot of people have a problem with.
Okay.
Um, and so, and I often, if I'm presenting on this, sometimes I'll get a lot of critics that
Yeah.
will be like, well, why is sex or spirituality a need for sexuality? Right? Like, and there's a lot of people that don't believe that spirituality is an essential element for healthy sexuality. Sorry, but I disagree. Because the problem is that when people think of spirituality, they
Mhm.
often just right off the bat connect with God. I don't necessarily have to believe in God to have good sex, is what they say, right? But spirituality is not necessarily about just God. It's about finding meaning, purpose. And
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
and so, and that is highly connected to sexuality. And so a lot of these individuals that have problematic sexuality, they look to these things because they're looking for meaning and purpose in their life. And they don't have that. Right. And so they
Mhm.
feel it with some of these behaviors because they lack true meaning and purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And what can I offer the world? What is my meaning in my life? And what's my legacy? Like, am I important? Am I valuable to enough that I can contribute to society? Right. And so that's kind of part of that spiritual dimension. But it's also about being able to reach that kind of spirituality with the partner where sex is not something to meet a physical need.
Yeah, it's not just about self-gratification.
Yeah, but it's about connection, intimacy, and that reaches spiritual element with your partner, transcends
Yeah.
a lot of that. And so there's a lot of spirituality when it comes to sexuality. And one of the things that Dr. Carnes talks about a lot is that that search for sex is sometimes really the search for the divine. And that divine could be a lot of things. It could be meaning, purpose, divinity with a partner, but it also can be God. And that search for the a connection with God or a higher power.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Because, what it's kind of like that. What's it all about? What's it all for? And if sex is just about achieving pleasure or orgasm and that's it, well, really? I mean, that's where we
Meaning.
get dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get dangerous because what are you willing to do to get to that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And some people with that maladaptive behavior, there's a lot of things that they're willing to do to get to that.
Elements of also procreation.
Yes,
That's
yes.
the spiritual element to it.
And there's talk about power and risk and responsibility and basically the potential of misusing with high consequences.
Yeah. Yes. So and then when we get to the spiritual, then it goes into passion. So that's our 12th dimension. And passion is about, like, when you get into an addiction and problematic sexual behavior, there's a lot of obsession. And the problem is that that's everything that is maladaptive, as you said, is actually a good thing that's been corrupted. And so this idea of obsession is not bad. It's just obsession is when you ignore everything else, right? And you're just focusing on one thing. But getting into that focus and that zone is a good thing. That's passion. So it's about connecting with those good elements of passion. We're just not ignoring everything and everybody else to get there and the consequences of that, right?
Right.
And so with passion is nurtured creativity, awareness, and we see our values, we see the things that we value the most, and we're not afraid to fight for those and to stand up for those and protect those. But where you get to where you have problems is when, not that people have passions, right? But it's when those passions are fighting, let's say, or advocating for certain groups, right? It's when that advocacy is clouded by being disconnected to all the other populations and that are affected or that are involved, like in the world that we live in, right? And so we can't just fight for people's rights at the expense of the rights of other people.
Right.
Like, there needs to be equality there. And so that passion is important. And where you get those problems is when it's fueled by anger and hate and not by love and creativity and meaning and purpose.
Wow. Yeah, I think it's appropriate that that's the 12th one.
I know. Because you oftentimes when you get into that, I mean, there's passion that you developed all through those dimensions. But
yes,
like the 12th step is after having a spiritual awakening, we share this message, and with everybody. So it's the idea that, after we get to the place where we get more sure of ourselves, we want to share our message. We want to help other people. And that's kind of that passion. We learn to let go of obsession and we learn to embrace passion instead. And so
but it's bridled, like what the Bible says, it's bridled in a healthy way. So our passions don't harm other people.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Because you become aware of all people's systems and cultures and
right.
populations and then that increased awareness of the inequality all around us is important.
So what do you say to people who say things to you such as, I don't think there is such a thing as maladaptive sexual behavior? or sexual addiction isn't a thing?
Well, like I would say, I mean, I understand a lot of the arguments that they make. And of course, there's people that are more educated than me on these arguments, but you get a lot of individuals that will argue that a lot of it is shame driven, especially how it's influenced by religious culture,
Mm-hmm.
like Christian
Mm-hmm.
Judaism, like this.
The shame is
So
from,
it's the people that have problematic sexual behaviors are just ones that have these religious backgrounds that it's really about religious shame, right? When in reality it's not necessarily true. Well, that there's a lot of people that have Christian backgrounds or religious backgrounds that have those struggles, and there tends to be a lot more susceptibility to shame just because of the idea of God and doing what's right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But that exists everywhere. Like it's just
Mm-hmm.
part of our culture. And so part of their idea is like, well, there's how much empirical evidence to support that this exists, right? But there's been so much debate on sexuality, and sexuality is such a hot topic that there has been not enough open-mindedness and a respect for each perception out, and that each of us has something to contribute to the table here with this, and to finding common ground. And so you get extremes,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
where it's like, well, sex addiction doesn't exist. Even the World Health Organization disagrees with that. So, and they added compulsive sexual behavior disorder. So there's always going to be politics around that. But
Mm-hmm.
my argument is let's look at what's true, and let's find common ground. Let's not just dismiss everybody, but let's recognize that there are people who suffer, people that are struggling, people that don't have control over their behaviors, that reduction in shame is not necessarily going to fix, right? And it's more complex. It's a multi-systemic issue.
Shame is part of it, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Just to eliminate that isn't enough.
It's not.
There's way more. With these 12
there's
dimensions.
Trauma, there's attachment. There's so many elements when it comes to how sex addiction is formed. And not everybody is a sex addict. I mean, because that's what you get on the other extreme. The ones that fight for sex addiction, it's like, well, then some of their problems is that everybody's a sex addict. And in reality, that's not true. So it's on a spectrum. Right? The more powerlessness and unmanageability that you have, the greater the level of shame, and the more your identity wraps up in your sexual behaviors, and the more loss of agency around these behaviors, the higher the level of the addiction is.
Excellent. So, tell me what the big picture idea is around your institute, the 12 Dimension. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the Dimensions Institute it's dimensionsinstitute.com. So we're trying to create a website that not only is the name of our clinic, but also a place to where there's education around the 12 dimensions and integrating those into treatment with others, and to anchor their recovery on the 12 dimensions, not on abstinence, sobriety, problem management, things like that.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely put a link to you.
Appreciate it.
In the notes.
Great.
It's a big subject with 12.
Is.
That's a lot, but I love the way they come together and give you a functional map, a journey of becoming and of looking into those deeper issues that show up as a behavior, right? So many great things about that. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You bet. So let's sum up this conversation with Kyle Reid and talk a little bit about 12 dimensions of sexuality. I'm going to cover all 12 dimensions, but before I do that, I think it's important to understand how expanding our understanding on sexuality is important. It's more than just the maturation program that we got in 5th grade, and it's more than just the medical or clinical process of how conception happens. Sexuality is just a part of our being. And then we're taught that it's nasty or naughty, and it's no, don't go there. And then we're also taught to multiply and replenish the earth. So there is a lot of contradiction there. And there's a lot of us, depending on how we learn about sexuality, where that contradiction becomes really tough to manage. Some of us learn through peers. We learn through curiosity. We learn through pornography, or maybe we've even been abused. And those experiences or those exposures can really distort a healthy attitude towards sexuality. Then what happens? It affects our behaviors. And our behaviors really make sense. When you understand the issues around our behaviors and what is driving behaviors, we really learn about our needs and our perceptions and our emptiness. Kyle taught us how these 12 different dimensions create sexuality for us. It's important to note that the first 6 dimensions are about ourselves, developing ourselves. The next 6 in the 12 dimensions are about how we, as a developed individual, then interact with other people. So let's go through each one of them one at a time. Number 1, nurturing. Kyle taught us how focusing on behaviors and on self-care and accepting one's current reality emphasize the importance of nurturing oneself and others. Behaviors can be clues into what we need and what we are seeking to find. Number 2, sensual awareness. When you hear the word sensual, many times we think of being sexy or being provocative. But sensual in this context is about using our senses, about experiences in general, not just sexual experiences. Where do our senses fall into life? What do we smell? What do we see? What do we hear? What do we feel? All those things, and being mindful about the world around us, promoting a broader awareness beyond personal issues. Number 3 centers on developing a positive self-image. Centering on developing a positive self-image and recognizing one's worthiness of love and belonging helps us accept love and belonging from others. When we accept ourselves as worthy of love, we can receive it. Number 4, a definition of self. This encourages examining all that we encompass, our identity, our strengths, and our weaknesses, and then taking responsibility for those and for one's life and for one's actions. Number 5, openness. Openness involves being comfortable with one's sexuality, reducing the shame, and maintaining open, vulnerable relationships with others. And I love how Kyle commented on this being a consistent openness with people that are trusted, that when we trust a certain person, we have the same consistency or intensity of openness. It doesn't change. It doesn't go back and forth where we're open one time and then closed off the next with the same person. That it's consistent and it gives us continuity in that relationship. Number 6, sexual renewal. I loved this concept. Can you imagine not only accepting sexuality, but celebrating it? For some, that seems impossible and even sinful. And there again is the contradiction. We're not going to be able to escape that we're a sexual being. Focusing and understanding on embracing one's sexuality and being open-minded about sexual knowledge and reclaiming a positive sexual identity. Number 7, relationships. Kyle examines the quality of relationships, both vertical, parent-child, and horizontal, meaning more peer, or that would be brother-sister, and emphasize the importance of healthy connections and where we get love. Number 8, partnership. Partnership highlights the importance of commitment and emotional connection in relationships, moving beyond blame into shared responsibility, meaning we close the escape hatches. They're closed. We choose to commit, we choose to stick with it, and it becomes an us problem rather than a you problem or a me problem. Number 9, non-genital intimacy. This encourages achieving intimacy without relying on the sexual acts or sexual touch, focusing on emotional and physical connection without an agenda, without an end game. It's just about deepening the connection and the insight into one another. Number 10, general intimacy. Kyle taught us that being vulnerable and open with a partner allows oneself to be seen and loved without guilt and shame. Number 11, Spirituality. This connects sexuality with finding meaning and purpose in life. This can be involving, am I important? And can I contribute? What is my legacy? What is the meaning of life? What is my meaning in life? And what is the purpose of life? Emphasizing the spiritual element of intimate connections. Kyle gets pushback here. Procreation without spirituality? Wow, that's a stretch. Your life and new life? Wow, that is a heavy responsibility. And number 12, passion. Kyle described passion as a good thing that has been corrupted. It's when you lose sight through obsession and forget all that comes with this good thing of sexuality. So you become fixated or obsessed about certain parts with losing all the other wonderful parts. Passion encourages nurturing creativity, awareness, and focusing on positive passion rather than obsession, and advocating for values without harming others. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Hungry for Healing. Remember, winning the race is not about finishing first, but is about rising each time you fall. So get up, get up, get up, and win the race.
The views and opinions expressed on the Hungry for Healing podcast by guests, hosts, or anyone appearing on the show are solely their own and do not represent the views of the Edify Group, its owners, employees, affiliates, or any other individual or organization. All content provided on this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional mental health treatment, therapy, medical advice, diagnosis, or care. If you are in need of support, please seek the services of a qualified mental health or medical professional. The podcast and its creators make no guarantees regarding the accuracy, completeness, or applicability of any information shared and assume no liability for any actions taken based on the content of this program.